The first proper wheel-to-wheel fight between McLaren drivers Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri delivered a thrilling Austrian Grand Prix with a great opening battle at the start and a tense conclusion. But after they collided in Canada, it so nearly went wrong between them when Piastri dived on Norris at turn 4, locked up and just missed his teammate. But McLaren seemed to view this actually a little bit more dimly than what happened in Canada, even though this didn't actually end in contact, didn't they, John?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It was a fascinating opening stint. Piastri had got past Leclerc as he needed to at turn 1, got that run, and then we were into the battle we've been waiting for the lead. We had a glimmer in Australia, but this was a proper head-to-head for the lead. And Oscar always had the benefit of DRS. Lando was in control, just managing to stay far enough ahead, and then as they built up to the pit stop, which was going to be the opportunity on lap 20, Oscar went for it, went down the inside at turn 4, locked up, just managed to back out in time and went on. But McLaren didn't like it because they felt that Oscar wasn't in control, that the lockup showed he'd gone too far. He was in almost the lap of the gods in terms of what happened. So that's why they gave the radio message to him that this was a step above what they'd like to see, rein it back. And that's then the race unfolded. Lando had the lead advantage into the pit stops, and then it played out from there.
It is interesting in the context of Canada because you would expect that one driver rear-ending another would be considered a more heinous offence than a near miss. But there is something that we need to get into on this, and this isn't us dwelling on Canada so much, but it's just interesting that there was an immediate test of them after they had those talks in the fallout of what happened in Montreal. But there's a clear distinction, isn't there, between, as far as McLaren's concerned, between what happened in Canada and what happened here, where Piastri's not in trouble, but he's more seen in the role of aggressor, isn't he?
I think so. I think it was the lockup that made the difference. Even though there was no contact, McLaren didn't like the lockup. They felt that was, not needed, that these battles need to be in control. And it's interestingly different to Canada, even though there was an actual collision there, because Andreas Stella revealed tonight in his session that actually one of the contributing factors to what happened in Canada was that Oscar's car derated. It basically lost the battery power, so it slowed down much more than Lando could ever have been prepared for, and that contributed to the incident. So this is why they came out of Canada, looked at the data, spoke to both drivers, and kind of reset. Andreas Stella kept saying tonight, Canada was benign, that there was no aggressor. It happened, Lando was a bit unfortunate. Whereas here, they're not upset with Oscar. He said sorry straight after the race, everything's fine, they know the racing rules, but it was a slight difference and just a slight step above before.
It was effectively a direct test, wasn't it, this, of the way they want to go racing and how they want the drivers to handle that. Canada was a bit different because Lando made a misjudgment. There was that extra contributing factor which they discussed in those conversations afterwards, whereas here it was much more Oscar trying to force the issue. This was more like what they were prepared to have to deal with, the two drivers racing so hard. That turn 4 lockup, while obviously helping avoid a collision, did then prove quite significant, didn't it? Because the flat spot meant that while Norris dived into the pits, Piastri stayed out and extended, but he just lost too much time extending that stint because he couldn't go quite as quickly with that flat spot. But why couldn't he catch Norris up thereafter? Because Stella revealed afterwards that should have been worth a couple of attempts a lap by having that, what I think was a 4-lap offset on Norris.
Yeah, I think what we saw today in parts was an illusion of pace. That in that first stint, you'd think, oh, Oscar's clearly the fastest driver here. He's being held up, just needs to get past and he'll go. But that was DRS. You're gaining 2-3 tenths advantage alone from the DRS. Plus, the lead car is charging its battery. Lando's having to charge the battery, give up some pace in the middle sector to ensure he had enough battery power to kind of protect the lead as much as possible along the two DRS zones. So you saw an illusionary pace almost. And when we got to both of them into clean air in that second stint, that 4-lap offset, was worth about 2 tenths of a second. But Lando was just quicker. He's been quicker in qualifying here. Probably in the end would have been 1-2 tenths ahead in qualifying. And today he was 1 tenth quicker in that stint. So he managed that pace in that middle stint, which effectively then killed the race off. That stint because Oscar was unable to get close enough to either potentially go for an undercut or to run much longer in that final stint.
It basically gave Piastri too much to do when they were back on mediums at the end, and it was on the mediums that Piastri got some of that love back in terms of the tyre offset, giving him that pace advantage, that couple of attempts that Stella said he should have had on the tyres, and Stella was quite keen to point this out. Give props to Norris for that middle stint on the hards. He was so quick on that that Piastri, even with that offset at that point of the race, just couldn't eat into him in the way that he would have hoped and expected. And I think, to your point about the battery, charging the battery, I think that helped Norris set himself for the end of the race. I think what happened is he had so much pace on a hard tyre, he was able to then do the lap time, manage the gap, without actually expending the battery in the way that he was in the first stint. So he was, I think, bracing himself for Piastri to come back at him, which didn't quite do, although there was a tense finish for Norris to manage, weren't they, as they came across the squabbling Fernando Alonso and Gabriel Bortoleto, which didn't make life easy for him, did it?
No, I think the race was still in the balance towards the end. It would have taken one mistake from either Lando to get Oscar right behind him. We would have been back into the same games as at the start, but potentially Oscar with a slight tyre benefit. And even Oscar, he got held up by the Alpine. We heard the radio message afterwards, not so happy about what happened there. So it was close. There wasn't much between them this weekend. It was 1/10 of a second in qualifying, potentially. It was 1/10 of a second probably on terms of race pace. But on days like today, just well executed by Lando, and that ultimately made the difference.
We've obviously touched on a bit of Piastri's racecraft with that turn 4 move. He admitted that it was, as McLaren put it in the middle of the race, too marginal. We've talked about Norris's outright speed, but I think we should also point to racecraft as well, because that is an area that has been a question mark for Norris at times, but it is also an area where he made a difference today. We talk a lot about turn 4, but actually turn 3 and 4, a few laps prior to that near miss, might have been where Piastri looks back in hindsight and says that's where he lost the race. Obviously got the run on Norris, was able to make a move up to turn 3. Norris really patient, really clever, let Piastri just get ahead, DRS back down to turn 4. Did Norris pass a bit of a test today in terms of racecraft versus Piastri? He's got one over on him.
I think so. I think it was a very intelligent approach here, because this is a sort of track that sucks people into incidents. We've seen it in the past with Max and Lando last season. We've seen Leclerc and Verstappen in the past. We've seen Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton in the past. It sucks drivers together.
The F2 race was a train wreck to this weekend. It was terrible.
This is a track that builds up. If you're racing for position with all the DRS, it builds it up to make incidents often more likely than not. And I think Lando was playing the long game, obviously mindful of Canada as well. Both of them mindful that they don't want another Canada repeat. But very clever, very intelligent to realise the corner was lost. But I'm not going to compromise myself too much. I'm going to play the long game, get the DRS and get back past again. And I think it was really exciting, especially because this is for the lead. This is the lead of a race, and these races all add up to the championship.
It'll be very interesting to see if Norris has got either a newfound patience or confidence because of the speed he knows that he has. I think that has been a bit of a mental safety net for him in dealing with some of the setbacks this season, because every time he has been honest, it has come with that kind of underlying knowledge that, well, the reason I've thrown it away is because I was in a position to win because I'm faster. I was in a position to be on pole because I'm faster. So it's not surprising that Norris is quick, because we've seen that plenty of times before. But it felt like he hit a new peak this weekend with that pace, with that control through the weekend leading up to pole position, with the way he's executed the Grand Prix. But as he put it after qualifying, anyone can be, or everyone I think is the word he used, everyone can be a hero in one weekend. So he needs to do this more than once, doesn't he?
Yeah, this was a weekend, I think you wrote a piece yesterday on this, that it was very Verstappen-esque weekend from Lando. Arrives here, the weight of the world on his shoulders, everyone talking about him as he cracked, as he messed things up with that crash in Canada. Then he's missing FP1 as well, so he loses an hour of running on the morning. And then as soon as he got in the car, absolutely on it, quickest in practice, quickest at qualifying, quickest in the race today. He was just at one. He showed a consistency that hasn't been there in previous weekends. There's been sessions where he's been quickest in Q1 and Q2, messes up in Q3, or he's hit a wall at the wrong point, or he's got something wrong at critical moments. Here there was none of that, and I think it will be fascinating now to see if he can build up on this, and there is this new degree of confidence. Maybe some of that's in his head, maybe there is an element that I can do this, I know I can do this. Maybe some of this is actually mechanical on the car, the new suspension changes at the front. They've addressed some of these kind of sensitivity issues that he's had. He was obviously clearly very confident qualifying yesterday, and maybe that will carry through. That it's a combination of both those factors coming together to help.
It'll be very interesting going to Silverstone next week, because it's immediately a test for Norris, but also McLaren as well. Dominant here this weekend. 3 orders of priority according to Andrea Stella. Track suited the car very well. Upgrades here worked. Temperatures went in their favour. So when we go to Silverstone next week, it'll be very interesting to see if it's Norris versus Piastri again and who comes out on top then.